from the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
PFF went through, and they did kind of a preview for the Broncos, free agency, NFL draft, and we were asking George Cherie about this. And as they laid it out very plainly, and I guess I hadn't really thought about it in the way that they put this together, is for the Broncos offense, there's really not a lot of questions, at least outside of quarterback and right tackle. Mm-hmm. Now, right tackle could be very simple. George Payton might say, we're going to put Juwan James out there. I'm not taking a big dead cap hit. Mm-hmm. Offensive line room.
We're going to pay this money you're playing anyway.
Figure it out.
Right.
You know, everybody, Mike Munchak, get them all on the same page because Juwan James is too talented a player just to walk out the door and take all this money with him that we never got a chance to really see or actualize his talent. So if we take that one out for just a second, then the biggest one is a quarterback. And it's a big one. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to make it sound superficial. Mm-hmm. We don't know what it's going to be. Could be Drew Lock, could be a vet, could be Deshaun Watson for all we know at this point. But it was cool to see for just a moment on paper something we really haven't seen for the Broncos offense for a really long time. On paper, all of those starting spots are filled. So on one hand, it could be very exciting because if you were able to, say, get Deshaun Watson or have significantly better quarterback play, then I mean, my goodness, the talent on this offense could put this team at least in competition to be one of the better groups. I mean, at least in the AFC. They're still in a really tough division. There's no question about it. Mm-hmm. But you set out last year in the offseason to put together an offense that could compete with the Chiefs. And at least on paper right now, you have the start. You have all these spots filled, and it's definitely not one of the most expensive offenses in the league. Like oftentimes, if all your starting spots are filled, it's because you had to pay out a bunch of contracts and you're probably a little top heavy on the offensive side. It's quite the opposite for the Broncos. They probably could afford to put more money into the offense, but they don't need to. Right. At least not right now. They don't have any holes to fill on the offense except for what they decided to do at quarterback. But again, that's what a lot of teams are in a position of right now. A lot of teams have that question mark at quarterback.
Yeah, and the way they've set this thing up is they're going to, as long as you can keep the quarterback cost down, you're going to be able to plug and play defensive free agents and continue to try to pay your guys where you need to and roll the thing forward. If you bring in a high-priced quarterback, that changes that. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to keep a lot of the players that you want to keep, and you're going to have to make some sacrifices and cuts. And, you know, in 3 years, when this offense matures and is due for contracts, you're going to have to pick and choose which ones you want to keep.
But, however, Ben, I'm going to argue the other side now.
Oh, of course you are.
I'm going to. But it's not necessarily to completely poke holes in what you've been saying because I still subscribe to your newsletter. I'm still a fan. Mm-hmm. But as you look at the defensive side, as you take a peek over at the defensive side, and as I mentioned to you earlier in the show, there are 5 question marks at starter that they have listed out here. 1, interior. They have right now Draymond Jones and Mike Purcell. Mm-hmm. These are only for sure guys coming back. Bradley Chubb's your only edge that they have as a starter. Mm-hmm. Again, Malik Reed will be here, but starter. Josie Jewell, linebacker, he probably could upgrade there, but they have him on here. Michael Ojemudia, Bryce Callahan, and Kareem Jackson. Those are your only for sures. You have 5 missing starters here. There's an argument to be made that the Broncos offense might have to start carrying this team.
Yeah,
that this is now shifting because you have put so much attention and youth, but that youth needs to start becoming something. You've put so much attention into the offense. That offense needs to start carrying its own weight, if not carrying the team at times. Can Drew Lock do that? Maybe. He hasn't been able to do it so far.
He hasn't done it so far. We'll find out this coming season.
My point is, this does kind of set up the people that have been pounding the table for Deshaun Watson. They've got a really good point here. They've got a really solid argument here. Because Vic Fangio is going to bring a certain level of production from this defense no matter what. And even if you don't have elite stars and you don't even have your top-end draft picks to be able to plug in these spots that I just listed, hey, if you've got a quarterback that can elevate that offense and keep you competitive, you can win some games. You may not win championships, but you can win some games. And you will be able to stay afloat like that for a while. Tell me I'm wrong.
You are wrong. We saw this team get roasted by competent offenses late in the season when they were just down personnel. They were down too much in terms of personnel. Like Vic Fangio is going to squeeze every ounce of talent out of the guys that he can. But reality is when you're down to CB 8, 9, and 10, and you're down to edge rusher 2, 4, and 5, you're down to a whole backup defensive line. Like Buffalo torched them. There were teams out there that kind of took advantage. There were teams that scored more points than they should have late in the season. And that's the thing. Vic Fangio's going to squeeze every ounce of talent out of these guys he can, but at the end of the day, if he doesn't have the horses to do it, it's not going to get done. So the idea that you can just get by with no-name nobodies is not actually accurate at all.
Ben, I'm telling you, I've seen the light.
You sound so convincing right now.
I am about.
This is definitely not a bit.
Nope, this is not a bit. This is not a bit. I'm telling you that this article very plainly.
Who wrote this article again?
This is Pro Football Focus. They very plainly laid it out. The Broncos are in a position right now where
yes, the offense needs to score more points.
They can plug and play almost anybody on the defensive side.
Except that's not true, though. I mean, it's just not true.
And on the offensive side, look, they've tried every other way. At this point, Ben, you have to at least acknowledge that they have tried this method. They have tried to go average quarterback to below average quarterback with an elite defense for a long time, and it just has not panned out.
True.
And you can't tell me that going into this season, the definition of insanity and trying to do it again the same way and hoping for different results is going to actually net different results, because I don't think it will. Like, I'm all for what Drew Lock very well could be, but we can't sit here very plainly and tell people that, yes, this offense can carry the defense next year. Like, can you like, even for a minute, like, just strip away all the other stuff and just very honestly tell me that you expect the offense to carry the defense more often than not this next year. Coming up next, DNVR's Ryan Koenigsberg joins the program. We're going to talk about what the Broncos are going to do at right tackle. Juwan James, maybe he's plan A, maybe not. We'll get to it next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
We're really thrilled to have you on, Ryan Koenigsberg from DNVR. Let's talk a little bit about where you were today when you thought Juwan James had just been released by the Broncos.
Oh, I was on the podcast. We were recording the DNVR Broncos podcast, and I was like, what's going on here? But I didn't think he had been released. I really wasn't sure what happened. But, yeah, it says a lot just about the situation with him that everyone's mind went there.
Right, and it was the first thought everybody had is he retired? Is he getting cut? Is he that kind of stuff? I thought it was funny, but it was it was an interesting 20 minutes or so for me while I was trying to get confirmation of what I had assumed was the case, but trying to get confirmation that it took me about 20 minutes and. It's just it's sad that the situation has gotten to that point that's the direction everybody goes with their first thought, because that's what he's been over 2 years, a guy that is an afterthought for Broncos.
I mean, is it that unreasonable, Ryan?
No, it's not. It's unfortunate because obviously, the defense of Juwan James would, of course, be he was legitimately injured his first season, and he absolutely had every right to opt out in this last season. It's just, you add in like the comment that Vic Fangio made, which I really think started this whole thing when he said like, well, something along the lines of he's physically ready, but we just got to make sure he's mentally ready. That just started sowing seeds of doubt. And then when you end up being the only guy on the team to opt out, and then Garrett Bowles makes the comment saying he's got to earn the trust of the teammates back. It's just a long list of things that have shaped his reputation in Denver, which obviously isn't a good one. I personally have thought all off-season long that him retiring was a legitimate possibility just because, of those things that we've talked about. And I thought maybe he opts out last season and realizes, you know what, I really enjoyed my life outside of football and went that direction. But, you could also have a kind of an Ian Desmond scenario where we thought he was going to retire, but then he just decided to opt out because that was an option again. And so, yeah, it's an interesting scenario with him. Obviously, the best case scenario for the Broncos is he comes back and plays right tackle and does a good job.
Well, let's play the hypothetical game for a minute and assume that he doesn't. Are you okay with the right tackle position being Elijah Wilkinson and Calvin Anderson in a competition, or do you think that the Broncos need to make a concerted effort in free agency or the draft to shore that up?
I'm definitely not okay with that. And yeah, I mean, it would be nice to go in free agency, although you couldn't strike out worse than they have over the last however many years, 5 years, trying to get free agents at right tackle. There's, a reason why you don't get good free agents at the tackle position, because usually the good ones don't become free agents. And it would also obviously be nice to get a guy in the draft that Mike Munchak can work with, but there's no guarantees that that's going to work right away. So again, that's why I go back to, as much as, he's become a maligned character in Broncos country, I think you want to cross your fingers and hope he comes back, plays this year, although he's expensive, and plays well, because that's the best case scenario for the Broncos at that position, in my opinion.
Right, and that's a great point you make there, because everybody's got their plan A of what they want the Broncos to do at quarterback. That's been beat to death almost at this point. We're only in February on Twitter, but we haven't really talked about what the plan A is at right tackle. And the reason I bring that up in this case is Pro Football Focus kind of went through a little bit of their preview of the Broncos in free agency and the draft, and the only two holes that they put on the Broncos offense are at quarterback and right tackle. And so we were kind of discussing this in the last segment a little bit. And so it's what is everybody's plan A at right tackle? And it's almost kind of a good thing to have, because for so long, Ryan, when we talk about plan A along the offensive line, that was a really mixed bag, wasn't it? Oh,
absolutely. I mean, you were crossing your fingers at 3 of 5 positions at least every year. Garrett Bowles hitting last year was a massive blessing, and who knows how bad things would have been if he, had another down year. So, yeah, plan A at that position has to be Juwan James playing well. You go back to Drew Lock's best ever game, which came against the Houston Texans. Well, Juwan James started that game, and his, most of the damage Drew Lock did was in the first half when Juwan James was out there. You could trace back to that year, and some of the best football the Broncos played on the offensive side of the ball were when he was out there. So, when he's playing, he's a good player. And that's definitely got to be your plan A. And then plan B and C and all that other stuff is, probably nothing that's going to excite you unless the Broncos were to go with a tackle in the first round.
Ryan, I just had a conversation with Ben. I just had a disagreement with Ben. I think I'm starting to understand, maybe even just see more clearly the side where you guys have been coming in on this. I think there's a very strong case to be made that Vic Fangio, on the defensive side, he can mix and match. The reason he's here is for that elite defensive mind. I think that he can find a way to make that defense relevant. Right now, this team is primed based on the fact that their offense, and they've been building it for years now, is ready to go. I think this team is primed to kind of switch gears and become an offensive team, and they're just missing their quarterback. I've seen the light.
I mean, that's the thing. Obviously, another kind of scenario where you're talking about, okay, the best case scenario for the Broncos. Well, you can make the argument that Drew Lock hitting is that, and I do think that I still believe in Drew Lock. Just because you want, and I feel like I'm in the same position as the Broncos, right? You obviously, if you have an opportunity to upgrade to a top-tier quarterback in the NFL, you should be interested in that. That doesn't necessarily mean you don't believe in Drew Lock. And I think if Drew Lock gets this second year in his offense, they get the protection figured out, you get the drop issues solved a little bit for Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler, you can feel confident about what this offense can be.
Coming up next on Broncos Country Tonight, ESPN wrote an article on daring moves for all 32 teams. We're talking about what the Broncos' daring move is, coming up next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
ESPN put out daring moves. They had bold predictions. And we're at this point in the offseason. It is pretty funny, some of these articles.
There's nothing in this world I loathe more than bold prediction article.
I know.
Because it's not bold prediction. It's just, hey, make something up, make something stupid up, be super weird about it, and then put it out there as if it's a thing that could factually happen.
Yeah, so like 2 weeks ago was bold predictions, and remember that what came out of that was the Carolina Panthers.
Right.
offering 3 firsts and Christian McCaffrey to get Deshaun Watson.
Right.
And that became like, oh, well, this is a report. It's like, well, I mean, it wasn't so much a report as it was a bold prediction. But now they've done daring moves.
No, now we're done with bold predictions. Now it's daring moves. It's the same article with a different headline.
Hey, man. I mean, it's what it is, but they did something different. The reason I even bring this up, like I said, I know it annoys you.
Yeah, I know. I hate this stuff.
For the bold prediction, I think for the Broncos was sign Justin Simmons. So it wasn't even that bold. Like, yeah, right. They're going to give Justin Simmons top-tier safety money. That's going to happen one way or another. They'll either franchise tag him and give him top safety money, or they'll actually give him a contract, basically tied to what his level of play has been. And that's not really a bold prediction. But the daring move here was something I hadn't seen yet. And that's why I wanted to get to this.
Well, you have my rapt attention.
It's along the defensive line, actually.
Okay.
A daring move going after a specific
J.J. Watt?
free agent. No.
Oh, thank God.
No. They had, what was it? J.J. Watt they had going to Tennessee. That was the daring move for Tennessee. Go get J.J. Watt, which they needed outside. I mean, they needed an edge rusher. The daring move for the Broncos. Sign defensive tackle Leonard Williams.
Yeah, I don't think it's a daring move. I think it's a realistic one. Actually, I think Vanderdoes is who the Texans cut right now is probably in that mix as well.
Yeah, I saw you retweet that. I wanted to ask you about that.
Right, that was kind of why that was retweeted. It was just kind of a little tip like, hey, this might be one you want to keep your eye on.
Well, so it's an interesting spot for the Broncos because last year they recognized they needed more depth. They brought back Shelby Harris. But before that, they made a trade to get Jarrell Casey. And it was a good trade for the Broncos because it was a 5-time Pro Bowler you got for a 7th rounder.
You gave up nothing to get him,
They could afford his contract, at least in the short term. So, and then there was going to be no dead cap after this year. So it just made a lot of sense for the Broncos. It was an upgrade on the defensive line. They knew they weren't going to get both Derek Wolfe and Shelby Harris back. And at least at that time, once they got Jarrell Casey, I think that they sort of thought they were going to get neither of them.
Right.
And then they ended up getting Shelby Harris. I want to talk to you about this, but my very first question here is, first of all, how much does Leonard Williams upgrade the defensive line? Again, assuming you're moving on from Jarrell Casey. Would you rather have Shelby Harris or Leonard Williams?
That's the question. Would you rather have Shelby Harris or Leonard Williams? I'd rather have Shelby. Personally, he's we know what kind of locker room guy he is. We know what kind of standard that he sets and what he demands of other guys. We know his ability, especially in terms of deflecting passes over the last couple of years. Leonard Williams might be a little bit better pass rusher, like a little bit, but in the end, I don't think it's the cost benefit here is worth it. I don't think because you're gonna have to pay more for Leonard Williams than you have to pay for Shelby.
Oh, no, unquestionably.
And so I don't know what's the cost benefit here. And so at the end of the day, I don't know that you're getting anything more for your money. And to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense because they want to start Draymond on the other side.
They do.
They drafted him, they developed him. He's looked good in the limited reps. They want to get him out there. So your starting defensive line, I think, if you're the Broncos, ideally would be Shelby Harris, Mike Purcell, and Draymond Jones this coming season.
With McTelvin Agim rotated in.
Deshaun Williams, McTelvin Agim would both be in that.
Probably draft another guy.
And you draft another guy. You might sign a free agent, a guy like I said, Eddie Vanderdoes. That's one of those guys that Vic knows and is familiar with. So that's a guy that you could get in there. Leonard
Williams would be a commitment on the defensive line. And so then you'd say, well, Draymond Jones at this point he's been a guy that has shown some flashes. He's been more rotational than I think the Broncos up to this point. They probably wanted a bigger role for him this last year. But, for whatever reason, this third year is going to be the one that he really pops. McTelvin Agim really barely saw the field. And I don't want to discount what we could see from him in year 2, but I also don't want to plan on it. Does that make sense?
Well, when you draft a guy like that, you draft him to be a contributor in year 2. When you draft somebody on day 2, that's kind of the impetus behind that. You've drafted them to be a year 2 contributor. And so with McTelvin, you kind of do want to count. I mean, you want to be able to count on that. I understand that you're not super stoked about that right now. I understand not having faith in that because you don't know. But he played 95 total snaps. Played less than 100 snaps this past year. He had 8 tackles. I'm not sure that inspires a lot of faith. So you want him to be heavily in the mix in the rotation and be a contributor, but I don't think that counting on him to be the guy, as you're pointing it, is realistic.
So you don't go for a big swing here at defensive tackle?
I think your big swing is Shelby. You don't need a tackle. You got Mike Purcell. You already paid him.
Okay.
So, who are you taking off the field to put him on? That's with any acquisition. That's the first question that I ask myself. Now, obviously, quarterback's a different animal because there's only one. But with any other free agent acquisition that you put out there, the first question you ask yourself is, who am I taking off the field to put this guy on the field? If you have to take Shelby Harris or Draymond Jones off the field to put Leonard Williams on it, are you getting a significant boost in something? Not really. You're getting a slightly better pass rusher if you move in place of Shelby. So I don't know why you would make that move. I don't know if it's worth the money. Like in what way would you spend? Because you can get Shelby for probably $6 million a year. All right, maybe a little less. Leonard Williams is going to be closer to 10. So are you really going to spend double for the same productivity? That doesn't make sense to me.
Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight. Tune in to Broncos TV every weeknight at 6:30, right here on KTVD Channel 20.